Welcome back, creeps. Cameron here yet again with another video. It seems Halloween hits my channel just a little bit earlier every year, and that's no exception for 2017. I am here to review Paperbacks from Hell, the twisted history of 70s and 80s horror by Grady Hendrix. Now, you may notice Grady's name from other works of horror, such as My Best Friend's Exorcism and Horror Store, but Paperbacks from Hell is the first non-fiction offering from Grady. But before I get into the horrors that lie inside this book, I wanted to give you a little bit of a backstory about 70s and 80s horror fiction. With books like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, and the other being released in the early 70s, horror had found a new audience. People were hungry for more horror novels just like these, so publishers began to weigh in on that fact. And from then on, paperback originals started hitting drugstore stands everywhere. These books were selling faster than Linda Blair's head could spin. And by the mid-80s, we had hundreds of horror paperbacks that ranged from well-received to mediocre to downright trashy. Good or bad, they sold well up until the early 90s when these books began to fizzle out. From then on, a lot of these books became forgotten and were pushed into the outer reaches of used bookstore shelves. Unless you're weird like me, not very many people know about them anymore. But fortunately, Grady Hendrix has brought those books back into the light with Paperbacks from Hell. Years ago, Grady was at a science fiction convention and he was digging through a box of books when he discovered a used paperback of The Little People by John Christopher. He was so enticed by the cover that he decided to buy the book and read it, and then was completely blown away by the ludicrous plot about evil Nazi leprechauns. From then on, he started hitting up used bookstores and finding more books just like these. All of this led him to want to chronicle the history of these books. And so hundreds of horror paperbacks and many interviews later, we have Paperbacks from Hell. I've been a fan of these trashy little horror paperbacks for about 2 years now, so this, I have to say, was my most anticipated book of the year, and it did not let me down. This book comes complete with publisher histories, author and artist bios, shocking book synopses, and hundreds of full-color book covers. A lot of the artists that did the covers for these books and the authors of the books themselves are relatively unknown today, so it took a lot of research for Grady to compile all the history here in this book. And then aside from the history, all of the book plots that Grady chose to feature are a lot of fun and quite shocking at times. Some of these book plots borderline on downright offensive, but you have to remember it was the 80s. It was a very different time. Wrapping up, this book is very well researched and beautiful to look at. Even if you aren't a horror fan, I think you can appreciate this book for the artwork. This book is also really good for publisher aficionados, so if you're into that kind of thing, this book definitely lays down some interesting history. Overall, Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix gets my highest recommendation. It goes on sale September 19th of this year, so I definitely recommend pre-ordering a copy while it's cheap. And I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll see you next time.